This conference will now be recorded.
I'm just waiting for the clock to kick over to 3 o'clock before we start. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll call to order this hearing of March 30th, 2021 in the matter of SPR 20-011, SEP 20-016, and CUP 20-001, an application for Belmont RV. My name is Joe Turner. I'm the city's hearings examiner. I'll start with some brief announcements and a summary of the process that will follow this afternoon, I guess. This online hearing is reasonable and necessary at this time to comply with the state's social distancing order, maintain public health and safety, and meet state-imposed deadlines for decisions on land use applications. I'll ask that everyone mute their microphone to begin with so we don't get any feedback or other background noise. And I will begin with some brief announcements and a summary of the process that will follow so everyone understands how you can participate in the hearing. I start by saying I am not a city employee. I am licensed as an attorney and trained as a planner. I serve under contract at the City Council. I say that so you know you're getting a somewhat independent review of the application before me today. My role as the hearings examiner is to conduct the hearings and to make decisions about certain land use matters in the City of Woodland. In making those decisions, I am required to apply the city's existing laws. I am not a policymaker. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. If you think that the laws need to be changed, you can work with City Council and Planning Commission to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings examiner, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker, and I believe I am unbiased with regard to the application before me today. I have not had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any of the surrounding properties. But you have the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. I have read the materials in the city's case file, including the application, staff report, and all of the neighbor comment letters. In preparation for this hearing. But the procedure will follow. I will start with an overview of the hearing process generally, and then I'll go into some of the technical issues that relate to this specifics of this online format. But I will start by asking staff to summarize their staff report, copies of which are available on the city's website. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their proposal and respond to the staff report and the public comments that have been received so far. Then I will open it up for public testimony because we have no way to distinguish between anyone who wants to testify in support, in opposition, or questions or concerns. We'll just open it up to general public testimony, and I'll go through specifically how we'll do that in a bit. But once everyone who wants to testify about this application has had the opportunity to do so, I'll give the applicant and staff and the applicant in that order, an opportunity to respond to the testimony that was offered. If that response includes any new evidence, I will give everyone a chance to respond to the new evidence. Otherwise, I will close the public portion of the hearing and announce what I'm going to do. There is no opportunity for rebuttal of the applicant and staff's response. Generally, I will issue a written decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the public record. I will send that decision to the city. The city will send it to parties of record. So anyone who testifies orally or in writing or provides your name and mailing address to the city will be sure and receive a copy of my decision. It is important that you make your best case to me. My decisions may be appealed to City Council. The City Council may limit testimony on appeal or any appeal to the record that was before me. So if you feel it's important that myself or any future decision maker know something about this application, you need to make sure it gets into the record before me. In order to preserve your right to appeal, you or someone expressly representing you must testify orally or in writing before the close of the record. And in order to raise an issue on appeal, someone must have raised that issue before me. If you feel you need more time to prepare, you can ask me to hold the record open or continue the hearing. If I hold the record open, you'll have an opportunity to submit additional written testimony and evidence before I make a decision. If I continue the hearing, we can come back and do this again at a later date. It's my understanding staff intends to request a continuance of this application, of this hearing in this case, because in order to give the applicant an opportunity to take further steps to meet with the community and respond to the issues raised in the staff report. I'm predisposed to grant that opportunity, but I will, if anyone wants to raise any objections to the continuance, I would consider those arguments. But I will rule on that issue before the hearing, close of the hearing today. Assuming I continue, if I continue the hearing, let me back up. Due to issues with the online format that we've run into in other jurisdictions, it's my practice to hold the record open after the conclusion of the hearing, whether that be the hearing today, or if I continue the hearing, the continued hearing. So I would hold the record open for a minimum of 1 week after whatever our final hearing is, just in case people have issues logging on or otherwise participating in the hearing. And I would hold the record open for an additional week for the applicant to respond and give a final argument after that. But if anybody wants me to continue the hearing further or hold the record open further, you must make such a request before the conclusion of our final hearing. When you testify, please begin your testimony by stating your name and your full mailing address. Please spell your last name so I get it right. And if you represent someone else, please say so. Also, anytime you come back to testify, please state your name again. So you don't have to provide your mailing address at that point, but please state your name again so it's clear who is speaking. I have a number of little boxes on my screen and it's not always clear who's speaking at a particular time. There is no arbitrary limit to the length of time you can testify, but your testimony must be relevant to the applicable approval criteria which are set out in the staff report. Please be as concise and specific as possible. There are a number of attendees and I want to be sure everyone who wants to has an opportunity to testify. But as I noted, testimony should be relevant to the applicable approval criteria. Plus, your testimony should relate to the approval criteria specific criteria. I object to the use or this use shouldn't be approved isn't very helpful because it doesn't relate to the criteria. I object to this application because it doesn't comply with section whatever of the code is very helpful. So I'd appreciate it if everyone can focus their testimony on the criteria to the extent possible. Please don't repeat testimony offered by yourself or earlier witnesses. I take good notes and I can review the record of the hearing if I miss anything. This is not a popularity contest. Whether everyone loves the application or everybody hates it is not an issue I get to consider. The only issue before me is whether the application does or does not comply with the applicable approval criteria. If it does comply, I must approve the application. If it doesn't, I must deny the application. If I find that your testimony is irrelevant or repetitious, I'll interrupt you, explain why, and ask you to move on to another issue. Moving on to the specifics of the online platform here, we'll begin by muting all microphones. You'll need to unmute yourself or staff will unmute you. I'm pretty sure everyone can unmute themselves on this platform. But we'll work that out if we run into any issues. As I said, please state your name whenever you speak. I'll try and do so as well. When it's time for public testimony, I will go through the list of attendees that's on my screen here, just in the order that they appear. If anyone who's signed in by phone, I'm not sure if anybody is at this point, but if you are signed in by phone, your name won't appear, just your phone number. I will call the last 4 digits of your phone number and ask you to testify, state your name at that point. If by the time I call on you, someone else has already addressed all the issues you wanted to address, you can just say, I agree with the prior testimony, rather than repeating all those issues that have already been addressed. But that concludes my introduction. Ms. Johnston, you want to start us out?
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. So good afternoon. I'm Melissa Johnston. I'm Associate Planner with City of Woodland, and I will be providing the staff report for Conditional Use Permit 20-001, Site Plan Review 20-011, and SEPA Checklist 20-016. This proposal is for an RV camper park. It's spanning 2 parcels that total 3.69 acres of land. The initial proposal is for 72 full utility hookup sites, but a revision received this week reduces the proposal to 67 sites, and that will be discussed further along in the site plan review portion of the presentation. By Woodland Municipal Code, stays in RV camper parks are limited to 90 consecutive days, and patrons are not meant to move off-site and then back a few days later, according to our code. The applicant is proposing constructing an office building that will contain a restroom, shower, and laundry facility toward the front of the lot, and a second restroom building toward the rear of the lot. The proposal includes improvements to the street, and that will include sidewalk and also street trees along the property. The applicants do have previous approval for this site. In 2018, they received approval for a self-storage facility at this location, and that site plan is approved. Since then, self-storage has been added to the list of prohibited uses in all zones in the city, but this site plan was approved in 2018 when self-storage facilities were still approved use in the C2 zone. So the applicants are vested until, for as long as that permit is current, until it expires. So they may move forward with that initial proposal for self-storage at the site if they choose to. This is a look at the location for the proposal. Here are 2 maps showing that location for the proposed RV camper park. On the top is an aerial view from Cowlitz County GIS. You can see those 2 blue arrows are pointing to the lots that the landowner wishes to develop. And these 2 lots compose 3.69 acres in the interior of Belmont Loop. On the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, you can see the north half of our zoning map for the City of Woodland. Each zone has a list of uses that are permitted, and these are or conditional uses or prohibited uses. And each zone has a unique site design, architecture, and landscaping standards. The light pink color represents highway commercial zone, and we call that C-2, C2. Belmont Loop, as you can see, is entirely in the C2 zone. In the C2 zone, the permitted use list contains many commercial uses like auto repair, fast food, restaurants, other shops and services. And lodging is also an allowed permitted use. Specifically, hotels, motels, bed and breakfast are allowed as permitted uses. Now, RV camper parks are not on the permitted list. However, they are allowed as a conditional use. The conditional uses allowed in each zone require a conditional use permit. And some conditional use permits are approved through an administrative process, and others, like this one, the RV camper park, is approved through a hearing with the hearing examiner. Conditional uses have additional criterion standards that they must meet in order to be approved. And these are above and beyond the requirements of that base zone where they're proposed, in this case, the C2 zone. So RV parks must meet the criteria of 1772-100 Section D, and we'll look into this criteria further in the presentation. A conditional use permit does run with the land, so if this development is sold, the next owner will need to continue to follow the conditions of the conditional use permit. Additionally, the conditional use permit is reviewed annually, and so the applicant will need to make sure that through their daily operations that they are continuing to meet the conditions of approval for the conditional use permit in order to renew their permit. Okay, so review authority for this permit. This is required to be reviewed by the hearing examiner, and we are using consolidated review, and that allows for the highest review authority, in this case the examiner, to issue a decision on related applications. So today we have the site plan application and the SEPA checklist as well. This is a look at the site plan. This is the original one that was submitted, and this is what was included in the agenda packet and included in the notice of application. We did receive a revision yesterday, and that includes this section to the northeast of the site plan, and this is where more open space is proposed. I'll discuss this change a little bit later in the presentation as well. Okay, in the next slides, I'm going to walk through staff's review of the site plan and the conditional use permit proposal. This review will be based on Woodland Municipal Code, comments from our SEPA agencies, public comment, and Woodland's comprehensive plan. Okay. Well, first, development impact fees are required of all new developments. As a commercial proposal, this development will need to pay proportionally for their impacts to traffic in the area and fire service. The transportation impact fee is based on the expected PM peak hour trips, so that's like afternoon rush hour. Each campsite is expected to generate 0.27 PM peak hour trips. So for 72 sites, this would result in 19.44 trips and an approximate fee then of around $16,000. This exact figure will be calculated at the time of building permit issuance. So if there are changes to the site plan, that will affect the impact fee that is charged. So now if they have less campsites, that may be less of a fee. If the applicant chooses to include more commercial use along the frontage, for example, that could increase the fee. It will be calculated at the time of building permit issuance. Our fire impact fees are charged based on the square footage of buildings, and so the impact fee for this proposal would be about $451. Okay, so streets and sidewalks. The street is mostly complete on Belmont Loop. However, the applicant will need to install a detached sidewalk and install the street trees in the planter strip between the sidewalk and the street. That's very similar to the development pattern that you currently see around Belmont Loop. And these improvements must be completed in accordance with the City of Woodland standards and Public Works standards. The applicant will be responsible to manage erosion during construction. There are state and national requirements, and an erosion control plan is required that will be submitted with the final engineering submission. Water and sewer are available throughout Belmont Loop, and the applicant is required to coordinate with Public Works and Clark Kellett's Fire and Rescue in connecting to this infrastructure. The applicant is also responsible for sewer upgrades that are specifically required by this proposal. Stormwater detention and treatment for Pacific Park binding site plan, the area of Belmont Loop, is addressed by an off-site system, and so the applicant will be required to pipe on-site stormwater to the existing stormwater facilities. And a final TIR for stormwater will need to be submitted with the final engineering. The buildings and the RV uses are all set back 15 feet from the sidewalk. And the intent, though, of the C2 zone is to establish active, vibrant, and lively commercial uses close to the sidewalk and the street, ideally buildings abutting the sidewalk. But when an applicant proposes to include landscaping or other pedestrian-friendly space between the building or the use and the street, then they're allowed to be set back further from the sidewalk. So in this case, the applicant is proposing a landscaping buffer in between their use and the street. I will note that only 30 feet of the 515 feet of their frontage has a commercial building on it, and staff does view this as an underutilization of the frontage for this commercial use. And so we're recommending a condition to revise the site plan to include more commercial use along the frontage. The proposed building is 17 feet tall, and this is within the minimum and the maximum set for the C2 zone. Woodland Municipal Code sets standards for the number of parking spaces, screening of parking, and landscaping in and around the parking lot. So this proposal requires the minimum number of parking spaces, which is 4, and all spaces meet the minimum size requirement of 180 square feet. When parking lots are visible to the streets or other public spaces, screening with vegetation or low walls is required. The applicant proposes a planting strip with a mix of shrubs and trees in between the parking and the street, and this proposal does meet our landscaping code. For the landscaping in and around the parking lot, 1 tree is required for each 6 parking spaces. And staff is including each RV camper space in this calculation. And with that inclusion, then a total of 13 trees are required in the parking lot area or the campsite area. And the proposal does include 14 magnolia trees, so this meets Woodland Municipal Code. The next few slides, we'll talk about the architectural and site design standards. And this applies to all proposals in the C2 zone. And this is section 1736-130 of Woodland Municipal Code. All right, orientation to the street. Developments by code are meant to be oriented toward the street, so this means the buildings and the landscaping shall be predominant rather than parking lots. That these uses should be close to the street or at least landscaping. So for this proposal, the office building is visible to the street and separated by landscaping, and the RV sites are set back. Landscaping is provided in between. So this meets code requirement in staff's opinion. But again, we do recommend some additional commerce along the street to better meet the street orientation requirement. Otherwise, it meets code. We have a plaza requirement. If a building is larger than 4,000 square feet, this will not apply for this specific proposal, given the small size of the building. Building elevations is about the look of the proposed building, and this meets the requirements. It has they propose an easily identifiable entrance. There are awnings, and it meets the standards for windows and architectural detail. We require street trees for the frontage improvements. This is for the area that is in between the sidewalk and the street that's in the public right-of-way. The applicant is proposing Persian ironwood trees and a common street tree, and they're selected from the appropriate section of the Woodland street tree list, which is based on the planter strip size. The exact location of the trees will need to be approved by Public Works, and that will be based on site distance and other safety requirements. Pedestrian connections are required by code between the main sidewalk, parking lot, and each of the buildings. The walkway must be clearly defined and not less than 5 feet wide. In review of the proposal, the walkway does meet these code requirements, and staff asked that a condition be added that the applicant connect at least 3 of the campsites in a way that meets ADA standards. So 3 campsites will be connected to the parking lot and also the office and the restroom. For all developments in the C2 zone, garbage and recycling receptacles need to be screened. Site plan does indicate that there will be 2 enclosure locations and a structure built for that screening enclosure. Staff is recommending a condition that the applicant contact the waste hauler to review their site plan directly, so they can comment on the location and size of the enclosure to ensure that it's serviceable by their trucks, and will also hold the necessary containers and the volume of waste that's likely to be produced by the campground. A lighting plan was submitted with the application, and staff recommends the condition of approval that the site lighting will not conflict with traffic signs or signals. Signs in the commercial zone require a separate permit. Specifically, they require a building permit. And the size and the number of signs are limited by Woodland Municipal Code 1752, and they're also limited by the conditional use permit. So review of any proposed signs will occur when the building permit is submitted. So a condition is just recommended that the applicant apply later for the sign permit. So each conditional use has a list of its own specific criterion standards, and these criteria and standards go above and beyond its base zone. And that zone is, again, C2 in this case. The previous slides that we looked at apply to all commercial developments in C2. These next slides will apply specifically to RV camper parks. Right. So first, an RV camper park may have only 1 freestanding sign. This is more limited than the other uses in C2. And again, this will be reviewed as part of the building permit. Second, each space must be a minimum of 750 square feet. Their proposal exceeds this minimum. The smallest spot proposed is 910 square feet. Third, camper parks must be served by public sewer and water and meet state standards for RV parks. This proposal does. It will be served by water and sewer, and we request a condition of approval that the applicant submit proof of meeting state standards. Okay. Fourth, 20% of the site must be left as usable open space for the park's patrons. So the original site plan submitted, the one that was in the agenda packet, did not meet this standard. And the applicant submitted revisions yesterday. They removed 5 RV sites toward the northeast corner and put open space in that place. Though staff recommends that a condition of approval still be included, that we just keep the same conditions that we recommend to give more time for review and ensure that this site plan change does in fact satisfy the requirement. All right, fifth, criteria, yes, one residence is allowed for use by an owner or manager at an RV park, but none are proposed. And then finally, no one camper unit shall occupy a camper site for more than 90 consecutive days. Staff recommends that a condition of approval be added that the applicant submit records yearly during their annual review of their conditional use permit that will show that no camper was there for more than 90 days. That could be license plate numbers and dates stayed. Again, here's a look at the site plan. I wanted to point out the area where the open space is now proposed. Okay. Clark Cowlitz Fire and Rescue has reviewed the site plan. They've recommended approval and have submitted comments for necessary corrections. So the applicant will be required to work directly with Clark Cowlitz Fire and Rescue to revise the site plan and make the corrections that are noted in the field. Due to the size of this project and scope of the project, a SEPA checklist application was required. And so so the checklist and the review materials were sent to state and other local agencies for review. The Department of Ecology responded with instructions for stormwater protection during construction, and we recommend that these comments be added as conditions of approval. The Department of Ecology and Historic Preservation, DAP, have requested a survey for cultural resources. However, many years ago, 2 to 3 feet of fill was added to Belmont Loop. So staff is recommending that inadvertent discovery language be added to the site plan. And we recommend that we would still require a survey if groundwork is done beneath 18 inches. Okay. Woodlands Comprehensive Plan was adopted in 2016. It guides future land use development over the next 20 years. It goes through 2036. The plan describes our community vision for Woodland, and it sets land use goals and policies. Some of our city code is derived from plan to support the goals and policies and visions in the comp plan. Chapter 3 of the comp plan describes our goals and policies for land use. Some concerns to note there from staff. We're concerned that this proposal would fall short of the commercial land use goal of 20 jobs per acre. However, we do note that this goal is set for the commercial zone on the whole, and it's not meant to be applied parcel by parcel, but to offer just a handful of jobs for 3.69 acres is quite low in our opinion. So staff does recommend that the applicant increase commercial activity along the street frontage to help contribute more to the job land use goal. This proposal also produces actually a low number of peak hour trips, 19.44 for the 3.69 acres. And in staff's opinion, ideally, we'd like to see more traffic come to Belmont Loop as these parcels develop, so that people visiting Belmont Loop may make multiple stops during each trip to increase the commerce activity along the loop. And compatibility is noted in the land use chapter. Lodging is considered a compatible use in the C2 zone, and RV campsites are considered a conditional use. So by code, it is compatible, but there has been significant public concern that it is in fact not compatible. Then Chapter 5, the comp plan regards economic development goals and policies. In this section, some of these address a diverse and balanced economy, becoming a commercial center in Cowlitz County, and a center for recreation trades serving Lewis River and Mount St. Helens. An important goal is partnerships between city business property owners and civic groups, and commercial locations along arterials, and there's some mixed use goals set as well. So regarding these goals and policies, an RV park on Belmont Loop could add to the diversity of commercial services and draw travelers and customers to Belmont Loop. However, again, it may fall short of that 20 jobs per acre goal set in the comprehensive plan. The RV park does serve recreation trade in the area, though public raised the concerns that Belmont Loop specifically may not be the best location for this use or for meeting that goal. The C1 zone, there is a goal set in the comprehensive plan for the C1 zone that could be applicable here. This is for there to be a mix of use downtown, so a balance of commercial and residential. So while the RV camper park is not residential development, again, stays are limited to 90 days, it can contribute to a mix of uses in the area or diverse uses and increase customer traffic to Belmont Loop by introducing short-term camping stays there. Travelers staying at the park can use the shops and services, may use the shops and services along Belmont Loop. For public comment, we've received 17 letters, all in opposition, 19 as of today. And these letters cite most commonly crime, public safety, specifically children's safety, loss of customers, opposition to residential use, concerns that there'll be loss of customers for surrounding businesses due to the upkeep or other issues RV parks may pose, loss of commercial activity in the middle of the loop if two large lots are used for lodging, and concern for an increase in traffic, and also general concerns that in the city there are an increasing number of proposals for storage facilities, RV uses, and fast food. In review of the conditional use proposal, the hearing examiner uses criteria listed in 1772-50 of Woodland Municipal Code for granting the conditional use permit. So in the next few slides, I'll share staff's recommendations and review of these criteria. So for Criterion A, a proposed use will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the public in the vicinity. So as we have seen from the written testimony so far, the surrounding businesses and owners are very concerned about crime and safety. Crime has not been noted as an issue with the Woodland Shores RV Park in the south of town, and that was noted by our chief of police. But staff recommends that if crime is not adequately controlled or adequate measures are not put in place to control crime, that the RV park could risk not receiving annual renewal of the conditional use permit, especially if the development does lead to damages to surrounding property. Criterion B, it is required that the proposal meet or exceed performance standards of the district, that's C2. As the site plan is conditioned, staff does believe that the proposal meets or exceeds performance standards. Criterion C, the proposed development needs to be compatible generally with the surrounding land uses in terms of traffic and pedestrian circulation, building and design. So again, the proposal is commercial use lodging, which is permitted, and it is for an RV park, which is conditionally permitted. The building and the site do meet the site design standards. But again, residential use is a concern cited by the public, but through the occupancy limitation in code, this is not a residential application. And criteria D, the proposed use shall be in keeping with the goals and policies of the Woodland Comprehensive Plan. And while it does not fail a specific requirement, staff does note some concerns from the comprehensive plan, and those would be underutilization of street frontage, low contribution to the job acre goal, community opposition, that it may not meet the vision that they have for Belmont Loop. And this vision would be good to have on record in the future if we were to work together on a neighborhood level or a district level plan for the area. One more. Oh, and then criteria E is that all measures have been taken to minimize the possible adverse effects which the proposed use may have on the area in which it's located. So there's been many concerns about these impacts, crime, loss of customers, and safety. So we recommend that we take more time to address these concerns and adjust the site plan, which I'll talk about in just a few more slides. There's just a couple more slides left. Okay, so here, there are actually 26 conditions of approval that staff is recommending for this proposal. These conditions on this slide are specific to the conditional use permit. And they're based on, all the conditions are based on Woodland Municipal Code, Comprehensive Plan, and public comment so far. So first, condition 13 is to apply yearly for a conditional use permit. Condition 14, to increase commercial activity along the frontage. Condition 20, to revise the site plan with 20% open space. Though this has recently been addressed, we should leave this condition as is. And the stay duration should be documented, and we recommend including this documentation in the annual application for the conditional use permit. And condition number 26, we recommend that the applicant hold a neighborhood meeting. And we also ask that the hearing examiner continue this hearing today to give time for that neighborhood meeting. Our reasoning is that in Woodland Municipal Code, a requirement of planned unit residential development subdivisions and cell tower proposals, these all require a neighborhood meeting to be held. And the purpose of the neighborhood meeting is to share information and seek solutions to community concerns. And this would give the applicant time to hear more of these concerns and implement them as they are able into the site plan. So we believe that we need more time for this conversation to occur. This meeting would be scheduled, posted, and facilitated by the applicant, and the city representative would attend to participate in the meeting. This slide is to note that the hearing examiner can also impose conditions of approval for the conditional use permit, and the full list is in 1772-60, so it is not limited to the examples in that list. So finally, the staff recommendation for these applications is that more time is needed for a community discussion. We would like the hearing to be continued until after the neighborhood meeting can be held. Otherwise, the proposal does meet Woodland Municipal Code, in our opinion, for the site plan and for the conditional use. So staff would also recommend the 26 conditions of approval. That concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Ms. Johnston. I had some questions, some of which are just correcting minor typos. It's easier to just do it on the record. Others are substantive questions. So starting on page 8 of your staff report, front page. I think this is finding 33. I think this is just a typo. It says landscaping is. It ends with landscaping is predominant other than the parking lot. I assume that was just a leftover. It wasn't intended to be there.
That sounds right. Just a moment while I.
Yeah, gotta pull it up. No problem.
Sorry, one moment. Yes.
Yeah.
Oops. Right. That the does not belong. Thank you.
Okay. I didn't. Like I said, it's just easier to do this on the record.
Absolutely.
Finding 41, I think that cites to 1736-130H. I think that was intended to say M, as in man, pedestrian bike connections.
41?
Yes. Finding 41, yes, 17.
In the code reference, is it M instead of H?
I think so.
I will look that up and verify that.
Okay.
You can keep
I see that actually, that sounds right. I think it is M, but thank
Okay.
you for checking, Travis.
On that same page, finding 42. Actually, I think that still relates to finding 41. It doesn't address that. I didn't see bike parking addressed, but bike parking falls under that standard. And there is minimum bike parking requirements. If I were to approve this, I could just add a condition of approval requiring that they demonstrate compliance with the bike parking standard.
Yes, thank you.
That we answered. Some of these were addressed in your intro, so I'll just skip along. Finding 60 on page 12 cites to 1772-100 D6, the 90-day limit. This is more of a comment on the city's code that it's not real clear. It limits to no more than 90 consecutive days per year, and then says you can't move off the site for 1 day or so and move back thereafter. This is more, I think, directed at the applicant. The applicant may want to propose a condition to address the neighbor's concerns. That's exactly what would happen, because the code is less than clear. It would be very difficult to enforce if the applicant were to propose specific limitations on stay duration and return stays. That would clarify that issue that was clearly raised by the area residents. This doesn't relate to a specific finding. It's on page 19 of your staff report, the second paragraph under staff response. It says, given public response from the neighbors, the proposal may not match the community's vision for Belmont Loop. However, there's not a district or neighborhood plan for Belmont Loop. Staff would support this planning activity in the future. That makes sense. But what does this applicant need to do, if anything, regarding that?
Sorry if that's confusing. That was, I think, meant to start a conversation with surrounding business owners.
Okay, that's what. So this applicant isn't per se required to do something themselves, but more as part of that association or grouping.
No, it was a bigger picture comment. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then just as far as the conditions of approval, a couple of the conditions that what are listed as conditions of approval appear to be more suggestions for what the applicant do before that continued hearing, that they revise the site plan to provide more commercial use, and that they hold the neighborhood meeting. So I'm assuming those aren't recommended as actual conditions of approval, but that they comply with those in order to better meet the criteria. Is that correct? So those conditions would disappear if they did those things and we came back and it was actually approved.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
And what if, this may be more a question for the applicant, but what if anything is proposed in the open space in the revised plan? Because I didn't get a copy, didn't see a copy. It probably was in one of my emails, but I didn't see it. It looks like there's some scattered trees, but I don't know if those are existing trees or proposed to be planted, or if there are other features in the open space.
I'd like to hear more too from the applicant.
Okay. Those were the only questions I had for staff at this point. Thank you. Is the applicant here or represented? And you'll need to unmute yourself.
The applicant is represented.
Thank you.
Mason Wolf, the Wolf Project Management. I represent the applicant. Address 2401 West Main Street, Suite 210, Battleground, Washington. I am going to, I'm not going to present the project from the beginning. It was covered pretty well in the opening. So I'm going to cover points that I think were important or that may be missed, and maybe try to address a few things before we get into public testimony and additional questions. I assume I can share my screen, so I'm going to ask if it's working when I do. Oh, apparently that's not going to let me.
Can staff allow Mr. Wolf to share his screen?
It's a setting on my.
Oh, it's your end. Okay.
Yeah, I might be able to do it here real quick. If not, I'm going to have to just go with it.
I don't know if it works or not. Mine has a screen share button at the bottom, but
well, it does, but there's a setting that's not allowing it.
Yeah. One of the joys.
And for me to, I fixed it, but I'd have to restart my whole GoToMeeting application.
Okay.
So
try again now,
I can
Mason.
either do that if everybody. Say again.
She suggests you
well,
try
I don't
it again.
think it's on your end. Yeah, no, it's a setting on my computer. It's a security setting, and I fixed it, but I'd have to reboot. It'd take me about 2 minutes or a minute. If I could do that, that'd be great. If not, I'll just go on without it. That's a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Does everybody have a minute?
What are you going to show? Is it just the site
I'm
plan?
going to show the plat, the site plan and the differences. So it's probably not that important.
Okay, because we could have staff pull up the site plan. I assume Ms. Johnston can share her screen, and that we can see.
I will do that now if you want to begin.
Yeah, I just won't be able to point or blow it up or anything.
Okay.
Because you won't be able to see what I'm talking about on the full screen. So we'll just start with the open space, since that was the last question you kind of had. As Melissa mentioned, we were short the 20% because it was our understanding that the individual open spaces on each site counted towards that. There was just miscommunication. Those apparently do not count, and we didn't understand that. So we revised the plan so that the calculations do not include those individual campsite open spaces anymore. And as a result, we had to eliminate 5 spaces to get to that 20%. And we chose to put it where we did just because that was a small stretch there that already had quite a bit of open space because of the corners. And then just because that was the daycare, that seemed to be a big concern. It just puts a little bit more buffer noise-wise for the daycare. There is no security issue. This isn't going to be a trailer park. This is going to be a limited stay RV site. The management company that is currently planning to manage this, and I don't know their name, I've spoken with the applicant, is the same management company that runs the Clark County Fairgrounds RV Park. That site can be visited at thefairgroundrvpark.com. maybe the fairgrounds with an S. And there's some pictures there. Again, I can't share my screen, so I can't show those, but you can tell how clean they keep it. They've got strict CC&Rs. The applicant intends on using the same or very similar CC&Rs to limit the age of a vehicle that can be there. And they have to if it exceeds an age, as long as it's looks new, limitations like that. But it's intended to be, for lack of a better explanation, kind of like a KOA. They want these to be nice. So as a result, they also fence these entirely. The original plan shows that fence. I'm not sure if anybody was aware of that. And starting about 50 feet north on the south corner, it transitions from a cyclone fence to a wrought iron fence, and then was going to go along the frontage and then cut up on the south side of the parking lot and continue across with a gate, a wrought iron gate to the north side, and that wrought iron would have continued to the next corner, which is about 100 feet or so. The only change that in the fence is to try to make the frontage look more lively and synergetic, and to meet the landscape code, because we aren't going to meet the commercial code. We pushed that fence back to the back 15 feet, which is right at the edge of the RV sites that front on Belmont Loop. That is covered in a separate landscape plan. I don't know if you can pull that up. The frontage landscape plan was redone and will be more intense to give it a very nice look and street appeal going along there. The open space that we added in the north, to answer the question, we didn't revise the landscaping too much. I moved some trees around because we intended that to probably mostly be lawn and an area for dogs and children to play. So we're not proposing a lot more landscaping there, but the applicant could. Now, this landscape plan that is up in front of you, that's for the frontage, starting south of the entrance, the main entrance, and then continuing all the way to the south end of the frontage. Additionally, to increase commercial, we did add a mobile vendor pad that will be accessible through the emergency access driveway for vehicles, and pedestrians will be able to access it with a direct connection to the sidewalk. This is outside the fence, so this will be a use for the public. Let's see here. Again, she covered most everything, but I just want to reiterate that an RV park is a very specific allowance within the C2 zone, which this property is in. 173630, there's a list of conditional uses permitted, and RV parks is specifically one. And then when you go to the RV park condition code, there's 7 criteria you have to meet, 1 through 7, and none of those, this project as proposed meets all 7 of those criteria without question. That criteria 1 through 7 does not require the addition of commercial use. While it may be desired, it is not required by code, and we therefore request that condition number 14 be removed, as we meet the intent of the code with the moving back the fence and landscaping that with a landscape buffer between the use of the RV sites and the Belmont Loop. So applicant hereby does request that condition number 14 be removed. We don't see anywhere in the code that the city is authorized to impose that. Additionally, condition number 26, we also asked to be removed. You mentioned that it's less of a condition than it is a request of tonight's hearing. So 2 points. We would like that condition removed and any condition of a neighborhood meeting removed. We've read through the code and we don't see the city having any authority to require a neighborhood meeting. And so the applicant does not agree to that, not as a part of the process. Now the applicant has apparently met with a few people. They reached out to him last week, and he has said that he would agree to a meeting again to hear their concerns. But there are a number of, as she mentioned, 17 before today, and it sounds like a few more came in. Any meeting would be obviously, it would have to be tempered, for lack of a better word, coming to me. And again, he does want me to reiterate that CC&Rs similar to the fairgrounds ones are intended for this site. The one thing the applicant did agree to is, I don't know how this would sound in a condition, Mr. Examiner, but you mentioned adding a condition to somehow solidify the limited stay. Again, I don't know how it would read, but he is acceptable to putting a condition on that they within that 90 days they must leave and cannot reoccupy the site for at least 10 days after they leave. We are okay with the bike parking. We can accommodate that. I just want to reiterate, the RV code does not, by our reading, authorize the city to add a condition to increase commercial. That being said, we did, as I said, we did add a component for a little more commercial to be happen in the future with a mobile vendor cart, most likely a food cart, and that can be served with water, sewer, and electric. As mentioned in the previous presentation by Melissa, the chief of police did write a letter about security. Obviously, security is always an issue in any circumstance, residential, commercial, industrial. There is no data to show that nice RV sites like this that are specifically designed as recreational stays increase any criminal activity. In closing, presumably I haven't missed something I wanted to cover. We would like to close the hearing tonight after all testimony and the back and forth testimony is given. We actually do request that the hearing be closed tonight. We don't see any evidence of code requirement to suggest that any more time needs to be given for a decision. So the applicant hereby requests the hearing examiner approve the site plan as proposed with conditions and revisions, and with the removal of condition 14 and 26, and close the hearing at the end of this hearing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Would you be able to submit a copy of the CC&Rs that apply to the fairgrounds RV site, whatever the name of it is, so the public has an idea of what those CC&Rs would provide?
Since you're leaving the record open anyway for a week, we could track down a copy as a sample. I don't want it to be in the record as that's exactly what's going to be here, although I believe that is the intent. But as an example, we could submit that.
Okay. I'm assuming staff's going to ask how you would meet the comprehensive plan provisions regarding commercial activity, minimum jobs per acre. There were a number of similar comprehensive plan goals and policies that staff cited, how you would meet that without the additional commercial that they've proposed.
So in her presentation, I believe she answered that question herself. And as we read the code, and we think it's pretty clear, those are all targets and goals and not requirements. And it is a target and goal for the entire C2 zoning for the entire city limits. And I believe that allowing RV park specifically in the code as a conditional use codifies, that's probably not quite the right word, but it confirms that that's not going to be required on every site. And by specifically allowing this as a conditional use and then not adding any language in those codes 1 through 7 under 17, 72, 100D RV parks, there is nothing under that code that says you have to provide additional commercial use.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wu. Is that it from the applicant then? Or is there anyone else who wants to testify on behalf of the applicant? Okay, seeing none. Just going through my list, first several are city staff. So the first person who doesn't appear to be city staff is Mary Goebel. Ms. Goebel, you'll need to unmute yourself. And did you want to say anything?
I do wish just to express our concerns. I know I sent a letter.
Ms. Goebel, can you state your name and address and full mailing address? And your name is spelled in front of me, so I've got that. But if you can give us your name and my mailing address.
Yes, it is Mary Goebel. I am speaking on behalf of Woodland Veterinary Hospital. We are at 1840 Belmont Loop here in Woodland. So we are the direct southern neighboring property. Several of our concerns were addressed by Ms. Johnston earlier in the report. I guess knowing that this is intended to be one of the nicer RV parks, one big concern is how is that going to be enforced, considering there is no city enforcer to enforce such codes. Is it going to remain this way? This may be the intention, but you know, I guess I am under the impression now with needing to reapply for a conditional use permit every year that they will have to maintain these standards in order to keep that conditional use permit. But is that going to be adhered to? Will that always be what this property will look like? Another concern that we have, I know as far as synergy and energy of the businesses working together and bringing people to Belmont Loop to use the businesses. I don't know how advantageous this is going to be for most of the businesses here on Belmont Loop, unless there are other businesses that come to the community. Currently, we are not accepting new clients, so any of those 67 or 72 RV spaces that brings pets with them and has an emergency, they cannot be seen here. Most veterinary hospitals within Southwest Washington are at capacity, and we already, you know, the need from the community has placed a great strain on us, which is why we do not accept new clients. We currently serve our own client base and cannot accept new. I can imagine the outrage of what will happen when someone's pet gets injured or sick and we send them 15 or 20 minutes away to be seen, or more. Some people have to drive an hour or more to get emergency care. I know several of the other businesses on Belmont Loop are not walk-in basis businesses either. So added foot traffic, I don't know how advantageous that is going to be. Another concern of ours is the traffic for incoming and outgoing RVs. I personally have an RV and have traveled a lot. Yes, Belmont Loop is fairly big, but when you start stacking up several RVs to come in on a holiday weekend, it is severely going to impact traffic for those businesses that do have customers or clientele coming in. It's going to impact their ability to get here. I know security has been brought up a couple of times and somewhat dismissed, but it is definitely an issue for us, knowing that we house medications, medical supplies, controlled substances, and such. We do our due diligence in making sure that those are locked and safely disposed of. However, that does not stop people from looking or breaking in. I would certainly hope that with the aesthetic of this RV park, leaning towards a nicer facility, I would hope that that wouldn't be an issue, but it is definitely of concern for us. There has been a significant issue with homeless folks here in Belmont Loop. I don't want to encourage any more of that here, and I don't know how that is going to impact the RV park either and their tenants there. Personally, as an RV traveler, I would not choose a place in a business park if I was traveling for vacation. If I wanted to live somewhere, I would choose a nice park like that, but not for travel. For travel, you typically want somewhere close to recreation, close to stores, close to places that you can get to, especially if you travel in a motorhome. This really would not appeal to someone such as myself for traveling. Convenient since I work here, but I still would not, we still stand in opposition of this.
Thank you, Ms. Goebel. And I'll ask you to mute your microphone so we don't get feedback and other background noise. The next person I have on my list is just listed as Green Mountain resident. Could you, if you want to say anything, could you unmute your microphone and give us your name and address? And if you don't want to say anything, let us know. Not hearing anything. So we'll move on to the next person, Dr. Sulitzer. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me now? My name is Dr. Jeffrey Sulitzer, S as in Sam, U-L-I-T-Z-E-R, 271 East Ridge Drive, Woodland, Washington.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple of points. I definitely want to drive home the safety issue. In the sheriff's note, he mentions a neighborhood watch would be imposed or be helpful. Sorry, but that's not acceptable. Neighborhood watches are usually not a great way to stop crime in a commercial environment close to a freeway like that. So I think it makes sense in a very highly residential environment, but not in this environment. So safety is an issue. It's located close to a daycare that's in the facility, within Belmont Loop. I would like to know how that issue is going to be addressed, along with the baseball and softball fields that are right up the street, where there's always children there, and we need to make sure that we cover the safety of the children based on people who would come and go every supposed 90 days. Drug issues are big issues in environments like this, where there's itinerant residential environments. And particularly with RVs, so far I haven't heard any evidence that there will be any type of screening of the types of or criteria that need to be met as far as what RVs are going to be parked there. And as you know, RVs are typically used for creating drugs and the drug environment, such as meth and others. So an RV is an RV, and I would hate to see 67 potential RV drug locations. So that's a bit scary to me. Trash is an issue when it comes to environmental concerns. I'd like to know if the Planning Commission did an evaluation and an environmental impact study on the trash situation that will be generated in an environment like this. I appreciate that Mason Wolf, Mr. Wolf mentioned there, he has sample CC&Rs, but to me, sample CC&Rs doesn't cut it. We have wonderful CC&Rs in communities that I've lived in. I have no idea what will be the final CC&Rs in this community, and that is a big issue for me as a community person, and I don't think that's acceptable to suggest he could send us sample CC&Rs. That means nothing. I would want to see the CC&Rs, and apparently there aren't any in place at the moment. Also, I'd like to address that it doesn't appear to me, based on the presentation I just heard, that we just heard, that that it is not compatible. This is not compatible for land use. There's no recreation here. So I'm not sure where this recreation is going to come from. People just barbecuing, on a 900 square foot lot space. I don't understand. It's not near a lake. It's not near a river. So recreational use is not being supported. There's limited trade here, if any. I mean, I heard there's going to be some kind of patio or a pad for mobile business. Like, what is that mobile business? What are we recommending? How big is the pad? How many businesses will be there? How long will they be allowed to be there? This is all public safety threats and issues, and that needs to be decided upon before you, sir, need to approve or deny this, in my opinion. Also, there's not enough jobs created. We heard that. And I don't believe that a mobile business can create jobs as could a different type of business that would be more compatible with the veterinary business there, with the insurance business there, with the fast food businesses, and so on. Also, I'd like to add that this is materially detrimental to public welfare based on the fact that there's no safety or security that can be confirmed. And when you have people living up there to up to 90 days, it's very difficult to understand and vet who's living there and what their intentions are while they are living there. And that's a big issue. Also, I want to bring up this, and this is a critical component. The federal eviction moratoriums that the CDC has imposed as of, I think it was September 2020. It's actually, it was September 4th, 2020. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention imposed a moratorium on evictions. So how
does
would
that moratorium apply to this type of facility, which is specifically expressly not residential? It's a temporary RV park.
No, I understand that, sir, but there are going to be people going to make the petition that it is residential, and it's going to be very difficult to evict people who aren't paying or willing to leave. Well, let's just address the fact that they aren't willing to leave. How are they going to be evicted, and who's going to manage that? So that's a question.
Would have to do that through the legal process.
Understood. And I don't know who the applicant is. I don't know who this person is, and I don't know if I can, based on some of the comments that they'll send us a sample of the CC&Rs doesn't cut it for me that there's been enough due diligence on this project. Let's see. I'm almost finished, folks, so apologize. I just want to apologize in advance. Let's see. Lastly, let's build something that is good for the community, that supports the community's needs and wants, and maybe something that would benefit not only the commercial residents there or commercial folks that are there, but also the residents that live around in that area, including myself and others that are on this call. Thank you. I've concluded my time, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, sir. I will note that Section 1736-120 of the code requires that the applicant maintain this site in a neat and orderly manner. It goes on to more language than that, but that's kind of summary. So there is a specific code requirement which the city can enforce through its enforcement process, or also through the annual review. If it's not occurring, the city can revoke this approval. Dr. Sell, let's try to ask you to mute your microphone, please. And the next person on my list just says, waiting for name, parentheses, web. If anybody recognizes their sign in as that, go ahead and unmute yourself. If not, we'll come back at the end of this. I'm just going to ask anybody who wants to say anything to unmute, but okay, nobody's moving there. There's a person that just says Mary and then parentheses web. I'm assuming that she's signed on as through the website, but does anybody named Mary want to say anything at this point? There we go.
Hi, my name's Mary Grout, and I believe you're talking to me. So my name's Mary Grout, that's Grout,
Thank
and
you.
my address is 3712 Northwest Sandpiper Drive in Woodland. And I'm going to keep this short because I agree, so far I agree with everything the last two speakers have talked about. I am not a business owner. I'm a citizen here in Woodland, and this just seems so crazy to me. I mean, Belmont Loop is for businesses, and I don't really see this RV park as a business. As the last gentleman mentioned, there's going to be hardly any employees here. This is not a good business. It seems more residential, but yet it's not residential. It just seems absolutely crazy to put this into that business park. And the traffic already is getting really bad in Woodland. That's a major thoroughfare there. That's Green Mountain Road that goes to a lot of different homes. This is just going to really create a lot more problems with the traffic. Again, with the CC&Rs, everybody has those, or a lot of neighborhoods have those. How are they enforced? Many times they're not. How is this 90 days provision going to be enforced? Again, I just agree with everything regarding the safety, the land use, all of that. But as just a citizen, I really wish Woodland would focus on something that's more community oriented rather than another RV park. And I conclude my whatever I was going to say.
Thank you, Ms. Grout. Kimberly Brennan, and Ms. Grout, I'll ask you to mute your microphone as well. Kimberly Brennan, there we go.
Hi, my name's Kimberly Brennan. I own Kinderland, the child care center that abuts actually I own 1912 and 1906, and both buildings use. Kinderland is in both of those buildings. I share all of the safety concerns that have been previously mentioned quite a bit, since I have lots of other people's children that I take care of. I'm especially concerned because right now we always err on the side of caution. If we see someone that doesn't belong walking along our playground fence, walking through our parking lot, we call the police, and the addition of so many more unknown people is going to make it a challenge for us to filter appropriately. I'm even more concerned about the perception of potential clients. I think that parents, when they are looking at their childcare options, are going to think that this is not where they want to bring their kids because of the safety concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Brennan, I'll ask you to mute your microphone. And next one is on my list is Natalia Ditmer.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Natalia Ditmer. I'm at 714 Somerset Road in Woodland. I live in a neighborhood very close to this proposed site, and am extremely concerned with the potential of this application being approved. I agree with everything that's been said previously regarding safety of children and other aspects, but one of the things that stands out to me is that the comprehensive plan calls for a diverse and balanced economy. But as of late, it seems like our city is not creating diversity and balance. It feels like we continue to see the same types of businesses popping up, gas stations, RV properties, fast food restaurants. So that's repetitive and doesn't feel diverse and balanced. And if that's the goal of the city, I think we need to maybe change the comprehensive plan, because I don't feel like this is meeting that. It's starting to feel like we're becoming a large rest stop, and that's not what I think our small community wants. I think the businesses have been very clear about their concerns, and while surrounding small cities are attracting places like McMinimans and Rose Hours, we're attracting fast food, RV, and gas stations, and I think that's a concern. So that would be one of the main aspects that bothers me. The other thing is that I know there's the talk back and forth about whether this is residential or not residential. Frankly, 90 days or less is scarier than if it was residential. And the surrounding business owners have spoken. Their feelings are very clear. They've already been through a pretty tough year. COVID does nothing to help a small business, and it's hard enough operating a small business as it is. Then you add COVID and now this. And so I think our goal should be to do whatever we can to help our existing businesses thrive. and we should
I
do
understand,
nothing
but the
that
issue
might cause
before
them
me
to
is,
fail.
I understand, ma'am, but the issue before me is whether this use is allowed by it complies with the approval criteria. It is allowed by the code if it meets the criteria. So I understand that
and I don't
the
believe the
desire to support
comprehensive
businesses,
plan
but and
for
that's what I'll
diversity.
have to consider.
I
Yeah.
understand, I appreciate that, and that goes back to that comprehensive plan. This is
Okay.
not feeling diverse and balanced, it's feeling repetitive, and
Okay.
that's a concern.
Thank you, Ms. Ditmer.
Thank you.
And I'll ask you to mute yourself. John Sapp is the next person I have on my list.
Yes, my name is John Sapp, SAPP, 837 Somerset Road, Woodland.
Okay.
I would just like to voice my support for the comments that have been previously made, but I think for the most part, again, it's the support of the businesses that have chosen to set up their shops on Belmont Loop and those that we've supported. And from reading the comments that have been previously submitted, it's pretty much unanimous, but they're opposed to this because of what way it will impact their businesses. First, I want to thank them for their business and for how it supports our neighborhood. Again, I think the use of this space as far as a transient RV park really doesn't benefit the community or the residents in this area. The other thing I would just like to briefly speak about is sort of just to understand, this process. When we first started this meeting, it definitely appeared that this is, you're correct, strictly about meeting the standards as it's written in the code. But then toward the end, you mentioned requesting the applicant, along with city leaders, to hear us from a neighborhood standpoint to understand and get the feedback. I would like for that to be more of a condition prior to approval of the applicant, as opposed to just a nice thing to do, which will not take place if it's not made a part of the requirement of that. And then I think just a few other things, details in there. I don't quite understand the fire impact fee when it's just strictly associated with approximately an 800 square foot building. But yet when you put RVs on all of these 67 spots, you're going to have almost 61,000 square feet of trailers. They're going to definitely require and request fire protection. So even if it goes forward, I need to understand how it's being assessed in terms of fire impact fee. Beyond that, again, I think the people have previously spoken to the concerns of things. My plea would be a request that there is a hearing for the community. Many of us just found out about this today, and I think it'd be appropriate to have a response to allow us to have a meeting prior to the approval of this application. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As far as the fire impact fee, that's something that's been adopted by the city council, and it presumably is based on, I don't have it in front of me, but it's presumably based on square footage of building. This proposal doesn't have a significant amount of building square footage, so it has a reduced, although it may have a higher need for fire services, the way the code is written, it doesn't require a higher fee. So I cannot amend the code to provide that. So that, just in response to that one issue. Bobby Hamelman is next on my list.
Hello, my name is Dr. Roberta Hamelman. That's H-E-M-M-E-L-M-A-N. And I represent two businesses on Belmont Loop, one at 1933 Belmont Loop and the second one at 1837 Belmont Loop. My husband and I are currently in the process of building a brand new building on the corner of Old Pacific Highway and Belmont Loop. And in looking at the proposal for the RV parking, I do not feel that it is going to improve customer traffic to the local businesses that are already well established in this commercial area. Due to the limited stays of the people in the RV park, many of them are not going to take the time to establish a relationship with my chiropractic clinic. I believe this would hold true also for the acupuncturist. They're not going to temporarily enroll their children in the daycare, sign up for the music lessons. They're not going to need insurance or mortgages. Most of them are not looking to build a house. So the established businesses that have already been here and essentially put their time in are not going to be supported by this measure. The only ones that are really going to get the support are the fast food and the gas station. And I don't think that is fair to those of us who are here on the commercial basis. In putting that new building in, my secondary concern is that we had to abide by certain requirements of glazing and other aesthetic elements to improve the look and the appearance of this commercial area. I know they're doing a wrought iron fence across the frontage, but what about the whole width of Old Pacific Highway? That's all just cyclone fence. How does that look attractive? That in turn is going to degrade the value of my brand new, beautiful building. And it would be much easier for me just to put a fence around my property instead of all of the landscape requirements, the glazing requirements. I even had to put trellises on to appeal to the aesthetic effects. And so it is frustrating to see this go in right next to my brand new building. I also agree with everything said earlier about this is not a recreational area. This seems an odd place to put recreational vehicles, recreational campsites, as they are continually called. There's no recreation on this part of it. There's no real place to walk for services other than, again, the gas station and the fast food. And also with the limited number of employees that this RV park is bringing in, it'll bring the potential for new customers to an extremely low, if not a negative number. If the goal is 20 employees per acre, that would be almost 74 potential customers for a more standard to traditional use of the commercial property than what the RV park is bringing us. I don't feel like this is a good use of that space, especially being right in the center of all the other surrounding businesses. And
Dr. Hamelman, I just had one question.
Sure.
I thought you said you were talking about the 20 employees per acre, and you said, I think 74 customers. Did you mean employees there?
Well, if there's 20 employees per acre, that would be almost potentially 70. It'd be 74 employees, thus 74 potential.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I understood what you just said.
And then my last one is this creating a slippery slope of what is allowed? So if in my new building, what is proposed for doesn't work, does that mean I can now turn all those little rooms in that office space into living quarters?
No, this does not change the code. This is a listed use in the code. You're changing your building to residential is not allowed by the current code.
Even if it's temporary housing and I call it a motel?
If you change it to a motel, that would require, yes, you could change it to a motel is the short answer, yes. It would require additional city review because it's a different use. It would require different site plan, parking, fire compliance, I'm sure, and other changes. But yes, hotels and motels are a permitted use in this zone, so it wouldn't even require a conditional use permit.
Right, so that is another concern, like what are we opening the door for?
Well, it's not opening the door, it's allowed now. You could do that now. Anybody could. This site could be developed with a hotel motel. That's under the current code. The way to address that is to get the city council to change the code. But it is under the current code, that use is just allowed, period. Hotel motel. Okay, thank you, ma'am. And if you'll mute your microphone, please. Devin Reed. Devin Reed, did you want to say anything? Not hearing anything. Kim Brennan, I assume, is the applicant, is that correct? I'm not hearing anything from Tim Brennan. caller 3. Does anybody recognize themselves as caller 3? Okay. Again, at the end here, I'll just have staff unmute everyone. Anybody who hasn't had an opportunity can say so if they want to testify at that point, which should address everybody that we're not getting. Roy Andrewson.
Yes, my name is Roy Andrewson. The last name is spelled Andrewson. I'm at 401 Somerset Road.
Okay.
A lot of things have been already covered, of course, and I agree with most of what has been said, but there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on in a little more detail. A couple of times there's been mention of the childcare business that's very close by. There's going to be, well, these are transient people coming and going, and many of them are going to be carrying firearms with them when they come around. Nobody's mentioned that yet, but I think there's code requirements for proximity to childcare and school facilities with regards to people's ability to carry firearms, and I'm wondering whether we even comply with that. I also wanted to mention some comments from Ms. Johnston earlier on about some of the intents with C2 zoning. My understanding from what she said was that there's intended to be an emphasis on the structures, the buildings, the offices, and a de-emphasis on the parking lots. It seems to me this project is exactly opposite of that. And I find the suggestion that the showers and the laundry rooms can be talked about as a legitimate office building to be a pretty far stretch. The comment that there's not enough employees per acre, I think, is an obvious shortcoming and not a shortcoming that can be easily addressed. The idea that they're going to help out with that shortcoming by putting a pad for a food truck, I don't know, I found that an offensive and not a legitimate response to the shortcoming. I just think they're not going to be able to do it. I think the project's a very poor fit for this particular location, and I'm very strongly against it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sam with no last name. Ms. Johnston, how do they unmute themselves on the phone? Is there a star or something? Oh, looks like you know. See you on video. You'll need to unmute yourself somehow. Not hearing you yet. Nope, not hearing you yet. Ms. Johnston, do you know what they need to do to unmute themselves?
I'm sorry, I'm looking for clues here.
Yeah. It might be
We
star
might be
9. Pardon? Go ahead, Mr. Goddard.
It might be one of the callers, Melissa. You might have to try unmuting the callers to see if we get him.
He is a caller. I can see him on video, and he's got his phone to his ear. I don't know if the city can unmute him themselves.
Let me see if I can try.
I can't. We're working on it, sir.
You may need to enter an audio PIN. It looks like it's #779#.
Okay, try that. Try speaking. Nope, not hearing you yet. Nothing.
What is
can you hold that up again? What is the PIN?
Oh. #779#.
Now you show up as muted. you now have a microphone instead of a phone showing on my screen, but it's got a slash through it.
Okay.
So he's
Now,
able to speak, I think. He just needs to unmute himself. So I think, I don't know.
Oh,
Hi
testing
now.
turn
one.
green.
Hey, how's that?
Whatever happened worked. Somebody did
Yay.
something.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Well,
Thank you.
Mr.
Sorry. Thank you.
That's fine, Mr. Examiner and John and Melissa and Travis. Thanks for having us all here. My name is Sam Nigro. The last name is spelled Nigro. And my address, we're going to use my business address, and it is 1925 Belmont Loop here in Woodland, 98674. So I own numerous properties here in Belmont Loop. I own a 2-story office building here. I've owned that for 10 years. I own another office building across the street that I've had for, I believe, roughly 3 years, and I own a lot that's just adjacent to ours that I've actually applied for a permit and got a permit to build, and I'm intending on building, quite frankly, unless this thing goes through, and I may be pulling that and going to option B. But I, of course, am against the RV park, trailer park, whatever we want to call this there. And I just wanted to bring up just some issues. And Melissa, you yourself, your response to the public comment was that the applicant will need to be able to convincingly argue that the site will retain its commercial character and not evolve into a residential style use pattern. I can in no way see how this can even remotely be argued that we're going to maintain this as a business park when you have an RV park coming in. You know, there's a couple factors that a number of us actually sat down and visited about this. So I've got some bullets that I want to discuss. In that, the job, somebody said it was insulting. It is insulting to think, oh, you're going to be able to pull a food truck in there and you're going to increase the number of people that are actually going to be counted as working on site. I would argue that the applicant says that there's going to be like 0.9, we'll say 1 job per acre. Are these people going to be on payroll, or is it, oh, you can park your trailer here at, you know, no revenue to the state, no revenue to the city, and we can and that's your employee, the person that actually is allowed to stay there. Now, I think as per your target and your planning, Melissa, didn't you say I think the goal is 20 jobs per acre, and I think that we're falling short at 3.5 acres, over 60 jobs that arguably that we would like to have. I touch base on just the tax revenue. There is in no way, there's going to be no property tax, really, other than just the bare land that's going to be assessed, and there's going to be a liability to the city at this point.
Mr. Nigro, Mr. Nigro, I understand the concern about the lack of property tax revenue, but I don't think it's directly applicable to the approval criteria. The job standard in the comp plan is a relevant standard that they have to address. But
how about highest and best? Would highest and best use apply as well?
I don't believe so, unless there's some provision in the comprehensive plan that I'm not aware of.
Radical change to a neighborhood. Is that an issue? We should all expect some change, but radical change, and it's going to just change the energy. And this is a business park, for heaven's sakes. Now we're having 72 people move into trailers or RVs or whatever euphemism we want to use over there. You know, you look at the revenue that's going to be created to the owners, and believe me, I enjoy profit. I think it's a great thing, but it was brought up. Well, they need to make sure that we have that they comply with the conditional use permit. All right, that's all fine and good. It was mentioned that, well, we have nobody in the city of Woodland that enforces that. And even if they did enforce it, the fine is $1,500 a month into perpetuity. They can stay there, they can be in violation of it, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's my understanding. Is that correct?
The city can revoke the conditional use permit.
And if they do, then what happens after that?
This use has to shut down. It's no longer allowed.
I believe I was talking to Mr. Mr. Goddard. What's your thought on that? If you revoke
So
the conditional use permit,
then they would be pursued by code enforcement.
and then what happens? Are they just fined if they pay $1,500 a month? Is that all that's necessary?
So they would be fined on an ongoing basis, and the city would have to consider further legal action to go beyond the fine.
If they revoke the conditional use permit, it would still be
Yes.
allowed to continue?
Well, they would be continuing in violation, so that would be a violation of the city code. So through code enforcement, we would assess them fines.
You would, so it's my understanding, Mr. Tanner, that the fine would be assessed $1,500 a month, almost as a tax. And if you consider a 25% vacancy factor, I was talking to Mr. Jolma, and their goal is $800 per month per slip. So times 72. That's a gross of $57,000. You take $1,500 out of that a month, and that's still $56,000. They could just go on like that for 10 years. And I just argue that
continuing in violation of the city code, the city has other options beyond fines.
I don't believe so.
Okay, I'll have to look at that. Of Woodland, but I will look at that.
Yeah, if you would, that would be great. And you know, and just something that the police chief brought up, that if we're concerned as business owners here in Belmont Loop, that we could just install camera systems or upgrade our camera systems and our security systems. This is what I do for a living. I've been doing this for 30 years. That is virtually nothing, because the police chief knows. What you end up with is some guy walking around in a hoodie that you can't identify. It would be, I can't imagine that crime's not going to increase even far above what it is right here, right now. So, and I would just argue that somehow in the CCNRs, or I mean, if they bring people in, that somehow that the park would be financially responsible for damages of the, whatever the people do that are from their park. And lastly, I'm just going to mention that sex offender registries, I don't know if this has anything to do with it. They're not required to register. These people are transitory, and beyond a doubt, I'm a numbers guy, and there are going to be people in that park that are sex offenders, and they're going to be right next to the daycare. And I don't think we can help that. I would argue that, and again, I think somebody's going to speak on CCNRs, but I'm just amazed at the audacity of putting such a park here. If I would have ever known that, I would not have invested in Woodland, nor would I have bought properties here. I think it's going to ruin the business neighborhood. And that's all I have. I want to thank you all for your time.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
My next one is Jeff M.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jeff Minka. That's Mainka. I'm at 701 Somerset Road.
Okay.
I would like to reiterate a lot of the comments that have been spoken. I don't think I could say it any better. From Ms. Johnston all the way to Sam right there at the end, there's a lot of good things that have been said. Sam really hit on a point that I was concerned about, is pedophilia near public parks, near the school, kindergarten. And big concern of mine is the synergy. It appears that the business owners and the public have spoken and said we do not want this. It adds nothing to value to our neighborhood. It takes away from our neighborhood. I just moved here, and this is the last thing I would not move here. I would have to reiterate with Sam, if this was there, I don't think I would be here. The audacity to say, oh, we will give you some sample of CCNRs that may or may not apply is not really much of a guideline, very unprofessional. And just by that comment alone, I feel as if we are being hoodwinked and something is going to be pulled over our head. As you can see, Sam being a numbers guy, presented to you very quickly how quickly these people could pay for their fines and just run amok with very little effort given to them. So I'd love to hear that. Before the a move was made to end this. I completely make a move to do just the opposite. I think more public hearings should be commenced in order to investigate this further. And I think the public needs to have a lot more information from CCNRs, how they will be enforced, how you will keep your residents, local residents, safe from the transitory residents. Your eviction moratoriums is a big concern of mine. We can see that public right now has more rights than the actual landowner. So residentially, they might be able to stay there versus being evicted. I know that you said that it wasn't of concern, but one of the points of these meetings is to bring up the concern. Mr. Sapp brought up a very good point with the fire. I know that the code says what it does. However, if we have that kind of burden on our fire department, how safe am I with this issue of this fire hazard? I mean, we have people on vacation, transitory, whether they're doing meth labs or barbecuing. This is where they're the least vigilant. And if they're causing a strain on our fire department and we're not financially taking care of our fire department and making sure that they have
that's a policy.
I got you. I just think that we need to bring it to light because
but it's not something I consider in this review. It's not a basis for that particular issue isn't a basis for denial of this application.
I understand. Thank you. Just needed to be brought forward, obviously. Yeah.
But if you want to bring it forward, I'd suggest you bring it forward to the city council because they're the ones that can address that.
We'll have to start going there too. Thank you. Another concern of mine was I was very looking forward to the development of this area, and I see this as a loss of future business. And after listening to our business owners, if they would know this was coming in, I'm thinking from what I've been able to pull from them is they would not have put their business there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's pretty unanimous from both the business owners and from the likes of me and my neighbors. I have to say no tremendously and emphatically. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Menka. Debbie Kennel. Did Debbie Kennel want to say anything? Okay, not hearing anything. Caller 5, anybody recognize themselves? Ms. Johnston or Mr. Goddard, how do they unmute themselves on a phone?
You'll need to enter the audio pin. Sorry, which name did you just call, please?
It's just caller 5.
Caller 5. Let me try. I think they're unmuted now.
Anybody who's on the phone, can you say something and see if we can hear you? It still shows a phone. It doesn't show a microphone. The prior caller we switched to a microphone from a phone when somebody did something. I don't know if it's staff.
Can you hear this?
Yes. Something changed.
Okay. This is Jay Dawson, D-A-W-S-O-N. My address is 1933 Belmont Loop. I've been a business owner in Belmont Loop since the beginning, second building in. And I thoroughly oppose this. I believe what everybody has said is true in terms of safety. The issue of the CCNRs is a very big thing. To be told by him that they're going to give us a sample is just beyond the pale. And his attitude with it was beyond the pale, in my opinion. Okay. The idea of putting a chain link fence around there is horrible. I drove by 2 RV parks just yesterday that had chain link fences around them with the little plastic slats. Mm-hmm. It looked like a dump. I don't see how this can fit in with the current business community at all. It's not a fit. The city recently denied a retirement home on the other side because it didn't fit within the industrial area. If that didn't fit there, how does this fit here? And it's going to, if you look at the overall energy that it's going to bring in, it's negative. It's going to be a negative effect on all of our businesses. It's not going to promote any of us other than, like Bobby said, the gas station and the quick food places. So we would like to, for sure, if this goes through, that we have more time to solidify the CC&Rs. The idea that he wants this thing to be done today and then give us a sample list later is meaningless. It has no, you can't enforce anything then. So if this is allowed to go forward in this rapid pace without us pinning this stuff down, I don't think falls within the code.
And that's the issue.
How can you say we'll give you that later after you give us approval? We'll then give you a list that we might or might not follow.
Yep, I understand.
And looking at some public records, the people that are involved in this issue have some serious issues with not paying their bills, not have judgments, liens, bankruptcies. What if they start this project, get halfway through it, and then just dump it and don't pay their bills? Currently, they owe the state $20,000 in taxes on that property.
Okay, but that issue isn't relevant to the approval criteria. I understand the concern, but it's not an issue I can consider in approving or denying this application.
Well, then I would go back to
raised and everybody else has raised. I will consider. Mr. Dawson, you mentioned that, and I've seen it, heard it elsewhere in the written statements that the city denied a retirement community in the industrial. I have not seen that decision. I would like to. I will ask if the city or the public can provide me with a copy of that decision. And Travis, I see you nodding your head, so I'll see if you're able to. Are you able to do that so the public doesn't have to?
Yeah, that was a $30 million.
Just a second, Mr. Dawson. Just a second, Mr. Goddard.
So I can send you a copy of the link to the council, to the planning commission meeting and the city council meeting where that case was considered. That is all public record.
Great. Was there a written decision in that case, or was it just an oral decision by the city council?
The planning commission issued a recommendation and the city council denied it. So there was no written decision, just a council meeting video. Okay,
I'll review that, but I'd like to see what the basis for that decision was because it has been mentioned several times.
Because I think that had a proposal been put in something like that in Belmont Loop, where they had businesses in the bottom, a little bar, a haircut place, there would have been many, many more employees.
But that's not a much more appropriate use. Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Dawson, but that's not what was proposed. I have to review what is proposed and determine whether it meets the criteria or not. But I understand the concern.
And I'm just going to fall back on what other people said about the number of employees and the response from the applicant. Well, that's just a guideline. Well, if the guideline is we're trying to shoot for 20 employees per acre and we come in with less than one, I don't see how that even
has been well raised. I will consider it. We don't need to repeat it again.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's all I have to say. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Art is the only name I have. Does Art want to say anything? You'll need to unmute yourself. And I'm not seeing anything there. Ronald Hahn. Not hearing anything from Ronald Hahn. Caller 9. Anybody identify themselves as caller 9? And can we unmute caller 9? I'll let you know as soon as I see a change. There we go. Does anybody who's on the phone say something? And if we hear you, we'll let you know. I'm not hearing anything from caller 9. Okay, the next person on my list is just listed as LJ, and you've signed on the web. but also has a phone next to you, phone symbol. Not hearing anything from LJ. Steve Seward. You'll need to unmute yourself if you want to say anything.
Hello.
Steve, there we go.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to let us all speak today. My name is Steve Seward. I work for a company called Homesite Development. We are at 1906 Belmont Loop. I rent right now that building from, or a portion of that building from Kim Brennan, who spoke earlier.
Mhm.
I just want to reiterate again what everybody's already said about safety and security. One of the concerns we did have was that sex offenders are not required to register because it's not a residence. With not only the the daycare facility there, the music lessons facility, and then the baseball fields across the street. That is a giant concern. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay.
Yep. Obviously, you've already said, we've already heard and gone over the jobs, so I won't go into that at all. One of the concerns I had was that the number of people that will be brought to this area that could be potentially transient, and the city of Woodland doesn't really have a mass transit system, so those people are all dependent on walking around on foot or bike. I'm not convinced that all of these people will own a car, or use their cars if need. Another concern I had was if these people that come to this facility are transients, that if there is a element of drug use or criminality, that there isn't a very strong network of available public health services. I know there's the Columbia Wellness facility there. As it is, they're already, from what I've been reading, they're already at their maximum funding. So I don't know what it would do to add to that. So that is a concern again, and that comes back to safety and security. But I guess one of my key focuses here is, I know that we said that it's one thing to look at the applicant, but in the code, it says that, let me see where it said that. It says that it's 17.72015 conditional uses. Compliance with conditions of such a permit is the responsibility of the current property owner, whether that be the applicant or successor. And as we just heard from Mr. Wolf earlier, the applicant and land developer are not going to be the ones who are going to be managing or potentially owning this. If you look in the public record for the filings for the Belmont Loop RV or storage facility, it is already shown that it has a condition of sale, or I don't know what the word is, but for taking over of that company by what sounds to be like the owners of the Clark County RV park.
Oh, right.
Right. And so one of my concerns there is that the conditional use permit runs with the land. So it doesn't matter who the applicant is now. And even though the applicant might have the best wishes for this park, that doesn't necessarily mean that those best wishes are going to be held, going forward.
Right.
And lastly, I'd say that right in the conditional use language, it says that the intent of a conditional use permit is to provide flexibility within a zoning ordinance, allowing a jurisdiction to consider special uses which may be desirable or essential to a community that are not specifically allowed in a zoning district. And I just don't understand or see how an RV park is desirable or essential to a community. And as we've all heard today, the community they feel the same way, that it's not desirable or essential. For those reasons, I would really hope that the city would, take a look at other opportunities and deny this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Seward. In response to one of the issues that you raised, the change in ownership issue, if I were to approve this, I would impose conditions of approval that this applicant or any future operator would have to follow. I would strongly encourage the applicant, in this case, to propose specific conditions of approval to address all of the issues that have been raised. As numerous people have noted, the applicant proposed to provide a sample of CC&Rs. Those were, as was noted, that's not going to do any good unless those CC&Rs are imposed as a condition of approval. The city has no enforcement authority to require compliance of this applicant or any future owner. So I would strongly encourage the applicant to address that during the open record period, to propose some specific conditions of approval. If you aren't going to adopt particular CC&Rs, to propose conditions that would be in this, that are potentially in the CC&Rs. There's a lot of things that would be relevant to the park, its operation of the park itself, that aren't going to affect the community. But things that affect the community, it would be great if there were conditions that specifically address that. If we get to that point.
Chair?
Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Yeah. I forgot one other thing I'd like to add. It was in code 17.72.100.
1772.100?
Yes, sir. And that's
okay.
subsection.
Let me make sure I get the number right. Go ahead.
Yep, it's subsection 6 of that code, where it codifies a recreational vehicle camper park.
Mm-hmm.
Subsection 6 is occupancy, and it delineates here: no one camper unit shall occupy a camper site for more than 90 consecutive days per year.
Right.
So it is per year. It is not. So as the applicant said, they potentially be able to move every 10 days or whatever. The code kind of does already delineate that that is not an option, that they're only allowed to stay for a one period time of year.
But it says consecutive days. So under that specific language, a patron could be there for 90 consecutive days, move out for a week, come back for another 90 consecutive days. It doesn't say 90 days per year, which if the code said that would be in a lot easier position to. But that's again, the city. I have to apply the language, the code language adopted by the city.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you raising the issue, though. Caller 13, can we unmute them? If anybody, as soon as it changes on my screen, I'll let you know, and I'll ask you to, whoever's on the phone, to speak. There we go. Whoever's on the phone, anybody on the phone, please say something. If we hear you, we'll let you know. Oh, I heard something. Is anybody on the phone there? I heard a chime. Nope. Okay. Daniel Ketchum is the last person on my list.
Yes, my name is Dr. Daniel Ketchum. Last name is spelled Ketchum. I reside with my wife just off of Green Mountain Road, very near the site that we're discussing. And Mr. Examiner, I appreciate your comments. I'm also grateful that the applicant is represented by Mason Wolf today. I do have a couple of questions for you before I make comments, Mr. Examiner. Do I understand that in 2018, a storage facility was approved?
Yes, I'm not sure about the date, but yes, a storage facility was approved, and that approval is still valid. So they could build a storage facility on this site tomorrow because it's been approved. Or if,
and do I understand?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Or if this application were approved, they could build either one because they'd have two separate approvals. They can't do both.
Okay, then secondly, do I understand that since 2018, the zoning was changed to C2?
Yes, and that it's my understanding that C2 prohibits storage. Oh, Mr. Goddard's shaking his head.
So the zoning has not been changed, but there was changes to the zoning code. So there's a difference between a rezone and a change of permitted and prohibited uses.
Okay. So the RV storage facility is no longer allowed under the current code? Okay, I'm getting nods just in case this is just an audio recording.
That is correct.
Okay, so Dr. Ketchum, to answer your question, the code has changed. So RV storage facilities are no longer permitted, but they have been approved. They are vested under the prior code, so they still could build it. It would be a non-conforming use, it's effectively grandfathered in, to use the colloquial term, but so they could still build it. But
thank you, Mr. Examiner. Thank you, Mr. Goddard, for clarifying that. So since the zoning has changed, I understand then that the current application could be allowed and approved if it meets all of the other requirements. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, I don't know that the changes allowed for this use or that the prior code allowed it as well. I don't know that those code changes had any effect on this use, but the current code does allow this use as a conditional use if it meets the approval criteria.
All right. I am concerned that the zoning change might not have included this kind of an application. And so I would certainly request that you review, Mr. Examiner, that you review the process of the zoning change, the intent and motivation of the zoning change. I understand that it is your opinion that the zoning does now allow the present applicant, but I would certainly like to see what the original zoning change intent and motivation was and whether it would have included this kind of application. Secondly,
the change was adopted by the city council. The code is clear. This use is allowed, and I don't have the authority to review the process of making that change. That change was not appealed. The city council's adoption of the code was not appealed, and it's final, and I don't have any authority to reconsider it or review it. And as I noted, I don't know that code change affected the proposed use. It may have been allowed in the prior code. Whether it was or not, it doesn't really matter. It is allowed now, and that's what I have to apply.
All right. I understand that there must be someone who would have the authority to study the record. My bottom line is that I would ask the city to deny approval of this, so that's where I'm moving. And Mr. Examiner, you mentioned just a few moments ago that you would request a copy of specific conditions of approval, and or you would require that.
Well, I believe it would make this review easier because everyone would be on the same, would know what the applicant is proposing. There would be specific limitations on this use, which would allow me to determine whether or not it complies with the approval criteria. At this point, what's before me is, as numerous people have noted, is that there's not a lot of specifics about the use, which makes it more difficult to find that the application complies with the approval criteria.
Sure. I understand what you said, and I do believe that once you have reviewed that, or the city has reviewed it, that the neighbors, including us and many others who've already spoken, most of whom I agree.
Everybody a chance to respond. So what I'm going to do is hold the record open for a period for anybody to submit new testimony and evidence, including the applicant, if they want to submit proposed conditions of approval. I'll hold it over another period for everybody to respond to whatever was submitted during the first period. And then I would give the applicant the opportunity for final argument. But I want to make sure everybody gets the chance to see any new information that comes in and respond to that.
And by what means, Mr. Examiner, by what means will you alert those of us who are in this hearing and others who might be interested in that process?
That I'm going to ask Mr. Goddard and Mr. Johnston about, and I'll come back to them at the end here. But I'm assuming the city would put that information on its website, because I do this in a number of jurisdictions. I can't remember specifically how the city of Woodland does it with these online proceedings, but anything would be accessible from the city. Either you contact Ms. Johnson and she'll email it to you, they'll post it on the website. There are ways for the public to obtain copies or to view that information and obtain copies if you wish, either electronic or paper. And when we get back to staff, I'll ask them to clarify specifically how that would work. But there will be opportunities for anybody to review.
Thank you. And then in response to that, Ms. Johnson, do you have a copy of email addresses for all persons who are a part of this hearing so that you could send us a copy of those specific conditions of approval?
Mr. Goddard?
Mr. Goddard does.
So we will distribute the decision. We tend to do that by a blind CC. And if you have information, you can send it to us and we will send it out to in a similar manner, but it's typically not our policy to distribute private information of public members. So unless you do a public records request, we would not send out a vast list of emails. I apologize.
No, I don't think he's looking for a list of emails. He wants to know if the city will just forward on anything that during the open record period after the first week, anything that comes in, if the city would distribute it to the public via email, or do you post it on the website, or what's the process?
If you have me or Travis, then we have your email address and we will follow up using that email list. If you've logged on to GoToMeeting and you haven't emailed us in the past, I don't have your email. So please send me or Travis an email and we can add you to our contact list for this project proposal. And yes, we will be posting online. We post, where will it be posted, Travis? The notices and RFPs section on the website?
So we haven't had a open record in this type of situation. So I will make the commitment that we will post them on this agenda so that anybody who's currently at this meeting would be able to come in and see any of the submitted information by the various deadlines that the hearings examiner does request.
When you say come in and see, you mean on the web?
On the web.
Okay. So
very good. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Dr. Ketchum, I'll come back to you in just a second to make sure we've answered everything you want. But Mr. Goddard, would the city will the city email this stuff, whatever comes in during the open record period, email it out to whoever's email you have, or will you just post it on the website and people can go look?
We will email the decision to the parties of record, but the late submittals we will post online.
The open record submittals.
Open record submittals.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sure. I certainly do concur with all of the concerns expressed about specific CCRs. I also do not believe that the design standards are compatible with the Belmont Loop. Not only are they not compatible, nor do they match, they do not even approach the vision of Belmont Loop businesses. I strongly encourage the city to pursue as quickly as possible a district area plan. It's obviously needed. We needed that before now. It certainly would have assisted us, especially with this application. And again, I do not believe that this proposal is an acceptable option for what a district area plan would eventually propose. I concur with others who have commented that a neighborhood meeting is essential and that city representatives, plural, would attend. And just 15 minutes ago, I drove by that property on my way home. I stopped to visit briefly with another neighbor who lives nearby and a medical doctor who said he had no idea that this hearing was happening. And so it's obvious to me that we need an opportunity for area residents and business owners to respond further. I believe those are my comments and questions. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Ketchum. That's everybody that's on my list. I'm going to ask, let me finish this statement before we unmute everybody, but I'm going to ask the city to unmute everyone so that anybody who, for whatever reason, didn't have a chance to testify can do so. If we have numerous people, everybody's going to talk at once. So we'll try and figure out how to reduce that, make sure everybody gets a chance, but not everybody talking at once because we're just going to get a lot of feedback. So I will ask staff to unmute everyone. If anybody wants to say something, please just state your name and I'll write it down. We'll come make sure we get to you. Can we unmute everybody? Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Johnston.
LJ one more time. I see that LJ
sure.
has a PIN but has not been entered.
Okay.
So LJ, your PIN is #911#. If you are logged on as LJ, your audio PIN is #911#. If you enter that, I can unmute you. Otherwise, I can move ahead to unmute all participants.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, everybody has been unmuted by the city. Everybody's on my screen still shows as muted. I'm assuming they have to unmute themselves as well. And so, okay, Mr. Seward, I see your name.
Yeah.
Just a minute, Mr. Stewart and Ms. Ditmer. I see you're both green, but you've already had a chance to testify. I will, if you have additional non-repetitive, we're going into new issues. I will get back to you, but I don't see. Just a second. There's a number. I got a long list. I have to scroll down. I am not seeing anybody else who's desired to speak. So, what was? I've lost you. Mr. Ditmer, was it you who wanted to speak as well as no, it's Ms. Ditmer and somebody else. Mr. Seward.
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Ms. Ditmer, go ahead. Can you state your name again, please?
Natalia Ditmer.
Great, thank you.
So I'm new at this, but can you just explain to us once again, I'm new to the hearings, I'm new to all this, I just got this information today, but so even if all community members participating have voiced their concern and
I'm sorry, I've lost you. Your audio went away. You said voice their concern and I haven't heard anything since. Ms. Ditmer, I'm afraid I don't hear you. I don't know what happened. I'm pausing to give you a chance, but I'm still not hearing anything. To answer what I understood was your question, as I noted at the beginning, this isn't a popularity contest. The fact that everybody except the applicant who's testified is opposed to the application isn't something I get to consider. The issue, the only issue, is whether it complies with the code. But the applicant has the burden of proof to demonstrate that it does. The more information the applicant is able to give me, the easier it is to make that determination. But the fact that everybody is opposed to it isn't an issue I get to consider. And Ms. Ditmer, I'm still not hearing you. I apologize. But as I noted, I will hold the record open so people can submit additional written testimony.
Yeah, my connection just cut out, Joe. I apologize.
There, you're back. You're back, Ms. Ditmer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And unfortunately, I did not hear the first half of your response, and I apologize for that.
That's okay. I'm happy to repeat.
Would you repeat that one more time, please?
Yes, absolutely. As I noted in my introduction, this is not a popularity contest. The fact that everybody that's testified so far is opposed to it isn't an issue I get to consider. The only issue that's before me is whether the application does or does not comply with the approval criteria. That's what I have to base my decision on.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying that again. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Mr. Stewart, you had turned, there you go.
Yeah, I know some of the residents and other business owners, I myself didn't hear about this until a few days ago also. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we've been working from home. Obviously, COVID has put a hamper on a lot of people's normal activities. In working in the industry I do, which most of my contact with developments is with cities and local jurisdictions, standard timelines are not or have not been something that have been adhered to. So my question is there a special, allowance here that would give us more time to let the residents and other business owners know, beyond the standard, I think it was 10 days that was required to be notified for this project, or again, I'm just trying to think about the special conditions we're under right now with COVID-19 and the opportunity for local people of Woodland to be able to voice their concerns.
Sure. The city requires multiple forms of notice, mailed notice to people within a certain radius of the site.
I never got one of those.
Yeah, I assume you're beyond the radius of the site, or you may be if you're a tenant, I don't believe you'd get notice because it goes to the property owners based on the assessor's records.
Okay.
But you are here and had the opportunity to testify. And that's another reason I'm holding the record open, is to make sure the public, because of the COVID and the online format, et cetera, to make sure everybody gets a full opportunity. So,
and just for clarification, how long are you holding this open for? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that earlier.
I haven't decided that yet. I'm going to.
Okay. Thank you.
I will hold it open a minimum. Try and speak here. I will hold it open a minimum of 1 week for everybody to submit, and a minimum of 1 week for everybody to respond, and 1 week for the applicant. So a total of 3 weeks is the minimum. But beyond that, that's what I'm considering at this point. That's my standard practice, because it doesn't delay it too long, but it gives everybody a chance, an opportunity to respond. With that, I'm going to go back to city staff and then the applicant. Ms. Johnston, anything? Does the city want to respond to the issues that have been raised, or do you want to leave it to the applicant or respond during the open record?
I have a couple things, but I saw Travis just indicated he had something.
You want to go first, Mr. Johnston, or do you want Mr. Goddard's nodding?
I'll go. Okay. I wanted to comment that we've heard from the public. It's good to hear from the public today. A lot of clear vision for Belmont Loop and vision for the future of Belmont Loop. And this is more a general comment. This isn't. I can't apply this to this proposal before us today, but I think this would be very good to document some of the vision that's coming up today in a sub-area plan or a district level plan. From that, we can put together a use list that better captures our vision for what the property owner's vision for what Belmont Loop will be in the future, and maybe design standards. We can take this to City Council and change code. Looking at the map, a lot of Woodland is zoned C2, and this commercial zone, the uses and the standards in it, may not be serving Belmont Loop as well anymore. We may be evolving our vision for the area. That won't change things today for this proposal, but this is something that we can do together, and it sounds like this would be a good plan for us here. Then I wanted to reiterate that we would like to have the neighborhood meeting to continue this conversation and continue the record. Mr. Examiner, I wanted to comment that the KSL, the Kirkland Senior Living, that one involved a comp plan change and a rezone, and we can send.
I'm sorry, Kirkland Senior Living, is that okay?
Yeah,
Senior Living Center.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Ms. Johnston, you're breaking up a little. I don't know if it's you or me, but anyway, the KSL project was a senior living center, and it involved a comprehensive plan change and a zone change as well, I assume.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Anything else you wanted to? I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Oh, nothing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The problem with these online hearings is we can't hear when I'm speaking, I can't hear you, and vice versa. I don't believe that I have the authority to require the applicant to meet with the public. I certainly understand the public and the city's desire to have that happen, but I don't, unless you can point me somewhere, I don't believe I have the authority to do that. So a continuance to accommodate that wouldn't accomplish anything unless the applicant is willing to do it. But if you or Mr. Goddard have any, could cite any authority for that, I'd be happy to hear it.
I was looking at the, code section. It ends in 060. I was hoping to rely on, yes, 1772060. I am suggesting that use this code section to require a neighborhood meeting similar to what is required for cell towers and planned unit residential development.
Okay, I'm going to look at my online code real quick to see what exactly that says.
I believe a list of conditions that can be imposed by hearing examiner, and it's not an exhaustive list. It's not a complete list. Add some things to it. So I'm hoping through discretion that we could add this meeting.
But that requires conditions of approval, which would require that I approve the use before I could impose those. So requiring a meeting, I can't approve it. I can't require to hold a meeting before I approve it without. Sorry, I can't phrase this right, but I can't impose that as a condition of approval because I'm not going to approve it. If
the record's open.
Right. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say.
Very good. Hey, I'm
sorry. Just a minute, Mr. Goddard. I got to get back to my right screen. I was looking at the code there. Before we move on, I'll get to you in a minute, Mr. Goddard. I really want to hear what you have to say, but I had two other questions I want to make sure I don't forget to ask. There was statements that there is limited or no code enforcement staff at the city. Is the city capable of conducting code enforcement currently?
So the city,
and this is Mr. Goddard.
The city had a dedicated half-time code enforcement officer, and we no longer have that position. And so it is spread out through the other staff who do it on an as-needed basis, but the primary responsibility for that no longer lies in a single officer. So
you do have city staff that are capable of enforcing the code.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Just not dedicated staff. Thank you. And the food truck, the pad that they've proposed, would that require additional use, rather review by the city? maybe the state, but that's a separate issue. But is that are food trucks allowed in this zone? Do they require review?
The main review can be allowed under the site plan review for this project. Vendors are allowed in the C2 zone, and they would need to, the individual vendors would need to have Cowlitz County permit, business license, and they would be rent their space from the RV park.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any additional site plan review or anything like that if this was approved with that pad. Okay. Mr. Goddard, anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, for the record, I have been making a few comments in the chat as issues came up. Specifically, finding 41 was M, not H, so you have that correct. There is no highest and best use goal or policy in the land use chapter of the comprehensive plan. I also pointed out that the Planning Commission hearing, public hearing for the Kirkland Senior Living was February 18th in 2021, and the City Council meeting was March 15th, 2021. So those are available on the city's website for anyone to review that project. And I sent you an email with those links specifically, so you could see those. And for the record, I also CC'd the applicant's consultant so that they could see what was sent to you for the record. The other thing I put in the chat was the ordinance we are talking about is 1458 for the city of Woodland, and it was a code change. It was the code change prohibiting, yes, prohibiting self-storage facilities in all zones in the city of Woodland, and that code change went into effect March 2nd, 2020. So it is not related to this project, except for the fact that this site has a vested approval for a self-storage facility that was approved March 29th, 2018. So it was vested prior to the code change prohibiting storage facilities.
Okay. Mr. Goddard, do you know was this use RV camp facility an allowed use? What was that added recently to the code, or has it been there for a while?
It has been in the code prior to that change, and since I was here in 2018, it always has been in the code for this area.
Okay. Can you include the link that you sent me and to the applicant as an exhibit in the record, just so anybody else can find it? Post it on the website, I'm assuming. And Ms. Johnston, can you make your PowerPoint an exhibit as well, the one you showed, just so we can all review that if anybody wants to see it. Okay, anything else from the city?
Oh, I have one more thing. While we're here, this is more of a community conversation point, but I wanted to let you know that when we have site plan review applications type 2 or other type similar proposals, we publish those in the Reflector, and they're posted on our website. And in one of our next correspondences, I put the link where we post all of our notices of application.
And what's the mailing radius for this type of application?
There was not a mailing required for this particular type. Normally it's 200 or 300 feet, I believe.
So a conditional use permit doesn't require mailed notice?
This did not in chapter 1781.
Okay.
It did require on-site posting. We posted on site, we published twice in the Reflector, and it's posted on our website.
A sign on
And
the
we
site.
post in the web and the post office and at City Hall.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else from the city?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Again, Mason Wolf, the Wolf Project Management Consultant for the applicant. Thank you, everybody, for comments and concerns. I understand this is a bit controversial for reasons I'm still not totally fully understanding, but the concerns I do understand. My job is similar in that I look at the code and consult based on the code as it's written when a customer comes to me looking for me to work for them under land use. So I will try to address some of these concerns, but I do tend to stick to the code as best I can. So safety, I don't know how to directly address each and everybody's concern with safety. I can only say that the project can meet the code for safety. It will be the responsibility of the owner of the property and the management company to maintain a safe environment per city ordinances, as well as the land use code. And again, that'll be enforced by the city. The applicant, CC&Rs are not a requirement of this process. And so the applicant has not prepared any CC&Rs. And again, I tend to stick to the code and do what the code requires. However, in this instance, with the concerns that are out there, the applicant has saw fit that he is going to get us a set of CC&Rs that can be conditioned as what, I don't know the proper wording, Mr. Turner, but you can condition
if you want
the
to adopt them as adopt the CC&Rs as conditions of approval.
Yes.
Okay, that would be great.
So we'll try to submit those within a couple days, but definitely within the week that you're going to give us.
Okay.
You know, it's been pointed out a few times, but maybe a different aspect. This code very specifically says that in the C2 code on the east side of I-5 permits these following uses, or I'm sorry, the RV parks are specifically allowed east of the freeway. So when the code was written and adopted, it was the policy of the city that this was allowed in this zone. I think that makes it pretty clear that on the east side, C2, which is a pretty limited area, that they intended to have or allow an RV park. And I think between that and the changes we made to increase the landscape buffer from Belmont Loop, it meets the standard of synergetic, I think that was a word that's used in the code, and meet and blending with the existing and future uses of commercial. And it is diverse in the fact that it's at least right now the only one of them around. And so it increases that diversity of commercial use in this area. The 90-day thing is confusing with the code as written. I don't know what these CC&Rs will look like that address that, but you'll know when we submit them. Okay. Because again, I don't have a copy of them in front of me.
Sure. But if you want to propose conditions that would be more specific about how that would be addressed, that would be great.
Yes, we will. The food cart, you know, we hadn't proposed it before. It was mentioned in the findings by the city staff, and we thought there was room for it. It is not a bad place for it. It may not serve anything in the immediate future, but as businesses continue to grow here, and as this begins to take in occupancy, next year sometime, I'm guessing. And just for the public's knowledge, it's unlikely this will be taking in customers by this summer. I think it's technically possible with timelines, but it's very unlikely that the business will open by the end of the year or by the end of summer. Sorry, I'm trying to go through my notes here. There was a lot of them.
All right, no problem.
The fence is going to contain the site. So anybody coming and going, whether pedestrian or vehicle, will have to go through a gate. So that will limit the transient walk-bys that it sounds like already exist in this area. It sounds like there's already some issues going on in the area. So this particular proposal is going to have things in place to keep them from entering this property. And then just, I think finally, so I want to reiterate two things, but I recognize that with additional record, the record being open and additional items being submitted, that possibly this would change. But as of right now, we still request that the condition 14 be removed. We believe we meet the code.
What's 14? Sorry.
I'm sorry. That's the requirement for additional commercial use. Again, I want to reiterate that the code does not require it for RV park. And while it is the goal and target, it's not required. And that goal and target is for the overall C2. The target and goals for each zoning is typically for the entirety of that zoning for the whole city, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, etc. So yeah, we request that 14 be removed, and again 16 requirement of a neighborhood meeting. Again, it's not that the applicant isn't willing to meet with the neighbors; they just they want to do it outside of the process.
Sure.
I believe that is it, unless there's further questions. And just to finalize, we do request that the hearing be closed and then follow your recommendation of leaving the record open.
Okay. Just one comment that you can address during the open record. You're right that the code doesn't impose specific requirements as far as some of the issues that were raised, but it does require compliance with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, and some of those goals and policies related to number of jobs per acre. I know you just mentioned it, and I understand that argument. There were other goals and policies that are mentioned in the staff report. If you can give me more information about how those are met, I'd appreciate it during the open record, the first part of the open record period. The more information I have from everybody, the easier it is to determine whether or not these criteria are met. So that's one thing I'm looking at in considering this.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing. I am going to hold the record open. I don't have the authority to require that the applicant meet with the neighborhood. The code does require cell towers, and unit developments and something else. It doesn't require it for this particular use. So I can't make them do it. So there continuing the hearing wouldn't get us anywhere as far as such a meeting. But I am going to hold the record open. I'm going to hold it open for 3 weeks total. 1 week. Let me grab my calendar so I can give specific dates. Just a second. Okay. Today's March 30th, looking at the wrong one. So as I said, I'll hold it open for 1 week for anybody to submit additional testimony and evidence until April 6th. Mr. Goddard or Ms. Johnston, what time does the city, do things have to be received by the city? Is it 5 o'clock or is there an earlier deadline?
We specify 5.
Okay, so anything anybody wants to submit has to be physically received by 5 o'clock on April 6th by the city. You can send it to Ms. Johnston, you can send it via email, you can send it via regular mail or deliver it to the city. If deliveries are, I'm assuming things are, you can get it to the city. It has to be physically received by the city by 5 on the 6th of April. So if you're mailing it, be sure and leave enough time to do that. Email probably is your best bet. I will hold it open for a second week until April 13th, again at 5 o'clock, for anybody to respond to whatever was submitted during the first week. The second week may not raise new information, new issues may not be raised during the second week. It's limited to whatever was submitted during the first week. And then I'll hold it open until the 20th of April at 5 o'clock for the applicant to submit a final written argument without any new evidence. If the applicant wants to submit their final argument sooner, they can do so, and I'll close the record upon receipt of that. I will issue my written decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the record, so the latest would be May 4th. I will send my decision to the city. The city will send it to parties of record. So if you have testified orally or in writing, or you do so during the open record period, or anybody you contact does so, they will be sure and receive a copy of my decision when it's issued. But that concludes our hearing for tonight. Thank you all for your testimony and your patience with our online process. We're still working out the technical details. Hopefully we'll be back in person soon, but that concludes this hearing for tonight. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Call Andreessen, tell him good